Okay, we are now live. You may begin.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. I'm Barry Adams, and I am the second to last speaker of SEO Conf today. I am going to be talking about how technology is changing search and SEO. I hope to have some interesting information for you here, and that you'll leave this particular session with a bit more information about where SEO is headed, what kind of technologies are going to be dictating the future of SEO, and how you can prepare for that. So for those who don't know me, I'm Barry Adams. Although my name sounds very English, I'm actually a Dutchman, but I've been based in Belfast for nearly 10 years now. I've been doing SEO in one form or another since 1998. I specialize in technical SEO and SEO for news websites. I'm also a co-chief editor at State of Digital, and I recently also started writing columns for Search Engine Land. Those logos on your screen right now are supposed to impress you, so consider yourself duly impressed. This is what we currently associate with Google, with search. A nice clean interface. You type something in there, you press enter or click search, and you end up with nice 10 blue links. Google answering all your questions for you. That is old search and old results. Things are changing dramatically, as we are no doubt aware. The two main drivers, the two main technologies that are fueling this change are voice search machines, voice search assistants, and contextual trigger devices that are proactively searching for you. I'll start with the first type, voice search. Voice search is, of course, absolutely massive. You've probably heard a few mentions of it in the course of today and at other conferences as well. Generally speaking, it's people either talking to their smartphones or talking to their home assistants like the Amazon Echo, Google Home, you name it. And those technologies are really changing the way we interact with internet technology nowadays. It's massively growing. It's very, very fast. I do like this particular graph because it tends to show that call mom is significantly more popular than call dad. I think all of us are still preferring to call our mothers in times of need rather than call our fathers. It just goes to show that we are increasingly talking to our devices rather than just typing stuff either on our touchpads or on our keyboards. When we look at Amazon Echo especially, there's a massive user base that continues to grow sharply every single year. And it is by far the most popular device at the moment to install on homes and use as a home assistant. This data is for the US, but it also applies to most European countries where Amazon has a significant presence. Some stats to throw at you. Comscore says that half of all searches will be voice searches by 2020. I'm not 100% sure I agree with them on that, but it does go to show that the people who are looking at future trends do expect this to be quite significant. 21.5 million smart speakers in the US by 2020. That might actually be accurate because those smart speakers and home assistants are becoming ever more ubiquitous. And the last stat is for me the most interesting one. That 60% of people have only started using voice search in the last year. So it's a very rapidly growing technology with a very new user base, and people are discovering this technology and becoming more familiar with it. It's by no means mature, so there's lots of scope still for things to broaden and things to change, and for people to find new use cases for voice search. So what we see with voice search is that it doesn't necessarily cannibalize our computer time that much. There's a bit of cannibalization going on. For example, radio stations especially, we tend to just use our smartphones to listen to the radio and listen to music versus traditional radio. But it's not as much as some people thought it's going to be. I think what voice search is going to do is going to be similar as what mobile search has done to desktop search, is that it will be some cannibalization, there'll be some replacing there, but there's also going to be an add-on effect. We're going to see voice search enabling us to become online and engage with the internet in scenarios where currently we're not online. Currently, we're not doing anything interactive with the internet. For example, when you're cooking or when you're busy somewhere with your hands are occupied, that's when voice search is really going to come into play. And because, of course, those are scenarios where we're not using the computer in the first place, that's when voice search will come into its own. We can start talking to our devices, get responses back without stopping what we're actually doing, without having to go and sit behind a computer and sit behind or pick up our smartphones. This is also interesting that people tend to put their smart speakers in their living rooms, but also increasingly in the kitchen, and for some reason also in their bedroom. I'm not entirely happy with the last one, because you have to sort of wonder about how smart it is to put an always-on internet-connected microphone into your bedroom. But maybe I'm just being a little bit paranoid. But it's primarily the living room, of course, where we use our smart speakers, where we talk to our Alexas and our Google Homes and you name it. And the kitchen as well, that makes for very very effortless interaction with the machine. It's just, we can ask our smart assistant to play music while we're doing something, or to read out a recipe that we're making, something like that. It's an interesting picture that is painted by the dominance of Amazon Echo at the moment, because voice search is going to be so big. I think Google sort of considers it almost an existential threat to their current business model. Google, of course, is a web search engine, and they're trying to become dominant in voice search as well. But Amazon, because they also partner with Bing, is taking up the lion's share of the market at the moment. I think that's interesting. I think it's something Google wants to change, but the amount of stuff you can get done on an Amazon Echo is on a par with what you can get done with Google Home. And Amazon has, of course, the advantage that it lends itself better to commercial queries like buy this, order that, or check on delivery dates, things like that. So this is a very interesting field where Google, being the dominant search engine across the world for so many years, does not have the cutting edge at the moment. We're playing second fiddle to a large extent. And I, for one, think that's a good thing, because it means we will see a very vibrant and competitive landscape for the foreseeable future. And we're going to see some interesting competition play out there between the two big players there. And perhaps some smart third player can also come in and steal the limelight. For example, the guys behind Siri have been building their Viv voice assistant for quite a while. If you have some time, I do recommend you go and look up this video and see if you can find it and look at it, because they're giving a demo of what Viv can do, the kind of commercial interactions you can enable just by talking to your machines and not having to type stuff in anymore, and yes, the machine does most of the hard work for you. And I think that's the future where we're heading towards, slowly but steadily, where instead of typing things in and manually using computer systems, we start talking to them increasingly in a more natural human way, as if we were talking to someone else, a customer service representative at an organization, for example. So that's voice search. Now, the next I want to talk about is contextual triggers. Now, what do I mean by that? That's basically when devices do searches for us and trigger us without us actively using the devices at that time. So our devices, our smartphones especially, are going to be performing searches for us in the background without being prompted to do so. I'll give you an example of something that already happens. For example, you might have a calendar reminder in your calendar or in your smartphone to bring your mother to the airport with her flight number there because she's flying somewhere. And your phone will know this. Your phone will know that oh, you bring her to that airport, that particular flight number, and your phone is going to check that in the background, what the status of that flight is. And then in this case, it's an actual screenshot from someone who experienced this. They will get notified if, for example, that flight is delayed, and you have the reminder set in your calendar, and your phone will then say to you, hang on, you don't have to leave for the airport yet. You still have some time left, the flight's delayed, so, finish whatever you're doing. So the phone knows what's going to happen. The phone knows what you have on your calendar, what you're planning to do. The phone keeps tabs on that particular activity, whatever it is, and will notify you when something changes that might alter your plans. That's quite fascinating technology, and that's basically your device performing searches without you actively asking it to. There's a lot of different use case scenarios, which an article on Search Engine Land linked there at the bottom explains very, very well, and I do recommend you go and read that, because that is the future where we're heading towards. Where, for example, currently we're using our phones as sat-nav devices. In the future, that will be commercially incentivized as well, where the sat-nav knows where we're going, or it might even decide to alter our routes to bring us by a certain spot where we can make use of a certain discount code or a voucher, or it triggers us to, hey, you're 15 minutes early for your appointment, drop in here in the coffee shop, pick up a cup of coffee before you head to your next destination. Again, that's us being triggered to do something by our devices without us actively using the device. The device will proactively trigger us to take these actions. Another one is, for example, you can have a calendar reminder in your phone to go and do an outdoor activity. And then your phone, knowing what the weather report is going to be, will trigger you on the day or even the day before and offer you a discount code for an event that is indoors, so you won't be bothered by the rain. That's, again, a really interesting commercial opportunity, especially for advertisers, and something that I do foresee happening in the very near future. The other one is, of course, health tracking, fitness tracking apps. They're very, very popular. And now we're seeing increasingly that these apps are not just passively tracking what we do, they're also actively encouraging us to move. And moreover, they're sending us rewards. Rewards for being good, rewards for doing something beneficial, and rewards for being active and healthy people. We see this come to life in, for example, life insurance scenarios, where in the UK, if you have Vitality life insurance, you can sign up to the specific package. They'll send you an Apple Watch or whatever, connected to your health app on your phone. And then, you will be triggered to move a certain amount of steps per day. If you do that, you get a reward. You get a free Starbucks drink or whatever it is. But if you don't do that, if the app realizes you're not actively moving as much as your life insurance company wants you to move, they might choose to increase your insurance premium. So there is a downside to this as well, of course. This always-on mentality, this constantly being tracked mentality, means that the data also has repercussions. You also see it in, for example, car insurance, like Aviva car insurance, again in the UK. They can trigger you to install an app on your phone, to have the app active as you're driving. Not only does it prevent you from using your phone while you're driving, it also measures how fast you're going and how smooth your driving experience is. And again, they can reward you with a lower insurance premium if you're a very good and careful driver. Conversely, they can also punish you with a higher insurance premium if they think you're a very bad driver. So you have to be aware of these things. There's commercial opportunities there as well, but also a potential for a big brother type society where we will be punished and rewarded based on what we do, even when we're not actively engaging with the internet and not actively looking at websites or clicking on our Facebook apps. So if you are a company and you do decide that, hey, we want a slice of that, we want to be empowered to take charge of these technologies, to see what we can do to plug our content, our devices, our programs, our commercial opportunities into this technology, how do you do that? Well, basically, it's all about integration. It's about integrating your online presence, your products and your services with these machine systems so that the machines can use them as and when they want to, when it's contextually relevant for their own users. How does this work? Well, you have to keep in mind at the moment, more than half the traffic on the web is already machines talking to other machines. Bots make up the majority of web traffic as it is. Now, a decent chunk of those bots are bad bots. They're spammers, they're scrapers, impersonating bots, social media bots, hacker bots, you name it. But a decent chunk are, of course, also the good bots, the search engine spiders, the monitoring bots, the feeds, the APIs talking to one another, etc. So already the majority of traffic on the web is just machines talking to other machines. It's not actually people using the web. And I think that is only going to increase as we're starting to move away from screen interfaces and more towards the screenless interfaces like voice search engines and the contextual triggers. The technologies that will drive this for your website especially and your apps to a large extent are the following ones. And I'm going to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. So these are the technologies that you need to be aware of and need to keep an eye on and probably already start implementing and chasing after if you want to capitalize on the potential of voice search and contextual triggers. Structured data is, of course, the biggest one. On the blog, this is basically extra markup you can put on your website that makes your content machine readable. That takes the guesswork away from search engine indexers, and they just get a very clear outline of what your page is about, what kind of content you're serving, and that in turn allows those machine systems to use your content in the right context. For example, this SEO Conf is an online conference. We can mark it up with structured data, publish it on the website, so that a machine system, like a home assistant, can provide it as an answer to a question. For example, what kind of online events or online webinars are currently active or are going to be online in the next couple of weeks. The same with offline events. For example, you can have an offline event in London, and you can mark it up with structured data, and that allows your event to be listed as an answer when someone asks their voice assistant, hey, is there a marketing event or a business event on in the next couple of weeks in London? So with structured data, you make your content machine readable, and that will then enable users to get that as an answer for specific questions. Google is going very heavy with structured data. They really want to encourage websites to implement it. They have a very in-depth section on their developer's website explaining what structured data is, how you can implement it. And they recommend a whole range of different structured data types to be implemented on websites. All of these help search engines better understand your website, what kind of content you have on your website, and how that content can be used and reused in the right context, in the right scenario. One of the structured data formats I'm really excited about, which is currently in the pending stage of schema.org, so it's not officially approved yet, but that's the speakable standard. This basically allows you to identify certain CSS selectors on your websites and CSS IDs as being speakable. For example, for an article, you can put a headline and a summary in there. You can make sure that they are seen as part of the speakable specification so that it can be read out loud by a voice search engine. If you combine that with another one of the pending schemas, which is the how-to schema, which explains how to do certain things, for example, how to change the car's tire with step-by-step instructions. You combine that with the speakable instruction, and you basically have a completely machine-readable piece of content that can be read out by voice search assistants when someone asks that particular question. I think that's a really powerful technology and a really good use of structured data by search engines to enable these sorts of interactions with voice systems with a very high degree of accuracy. Because that's what the structured data actually does. It makes this more accurate. It takes the guessing game away. It makes it much easier for search engines to be confident that they're providing the right answer to users when someone requests some extra how-to guide or such a set of instructions from their voice assistant. A Google Assistant allows you to define actions. You can build apps with voice assistant as a business. I'd recommend you have a play around with that. Most of them are currently content-based actions where, for example, you can, as a publisher, make your podcast into an action or a news article into an action. And that will then end up in the assistant directory, which defines all the sorts of actions that a home assistant like Google Home can tap into and can actually read out to users. Again, this is all about accuracy for search engines. This is all about making sure that the content they provide is completely accurate and fulfills the specific need that the person asking the question wants it to do. So again, this is all about enabling voice search engines to interact with your content, with your website, and make sure that they can use it when it's appropriate for them to do so. Another thing we hear a lot about is, of course, position zero or the knowledge graph, where you get direct answers in search results. The majority of answers in Google Home, at least in Google's voice assistants, is currently provided by position zero results. And of course, that makes sense. Google is sort of using position zero in its own search results as a test bed for voice search. So if they get good feedback from people seeing these direct answers in search results, then Google can be pretty confident that they're also very useful to be read out as results for voice search queries. And triggering these is not particularly complicated, although the prerequisite is that you have a top 5 rank in Google for a specific query. But if you have that, then it again boils down to formatting the content correctly. In this particular example, this is simply a table on a web page. A table, an old-fashioned table with rows and columns, is a form of structured data. It is a very primitive and basic form of structured data, but nonetheless, it is structured data in a way that machines can understand it. Machines understand tables, tabular data. So this is very easily extracted from this particular web page, and Google will then show that as an answer, direct answer in the search results. Sometimes they get it wrong, but again, this is something that Google is consistently testing and experimenting with, extracting another form of structured data, namely lists. This is simply a very simple numbered list that Google will extract from search results and show as a direct answer. The folks at Build Visible have a really good article on how to trigger these sorts of position zero results and what kind of markup triggers it. And I do recommend you read that to see if you can, implement something similar on your own website. I like to use this website, Answer the Public, to find out what kind of questions people are actually asking. So you can type any topic into the Answer the Public website and you get a whole raft of potential questions that people might ask. And this then can basically inform your blog schedule for the foreseeable future, the type of articles you want to write, the type of content you want to put into your blog, and then see if you can format that in the correct way with either tables or bullet point lists to see if you can get that position zero result. There's also a more detailed guide published not that long ago on the Google blog about Google's featured snippets and what they actually are and how they actually work. I do recommend you have a read through that. I also like the voice search quality raters guidelines, an actual PDF document for the human quality raters that Google uses to evaluate the quality of their voice search results. And the interesting sentence in that particular document for me is this one. Your job as a quality rater is to provide feedback about the response from the assistant. Specifically, you will give feedback about the usefulness of the response. Usefulness is a key word there. It's all about being useful. And I think that's where you have to focus on when you start developing content for the knowledge graph for position zero and eventually for voice search answers as well. You have to make sure that you're actually useful and that your content will answer the question properly that someone is asking. You don't just want to half-ass this, you have to put the effort in. You have to create good content and make sure that the content is then properly interpretable by machines. Another technology that's driving this change is app indexing. Google is, of course, a web search engine, and as such, it doesn't have good visibility of what's happening inside apps on your smartphone. Now, they want you to make your app indexable so that they can actually see what's happening inside your app and can actually index it and then use that in search results. And what Google has been promising for a while is the ability to sort of stream apps through Google search without people having to install the app. So that someone can do a search on Google and then tap on a specific result that is enabled by app indexing and then get an app-like experience in their smartphone without them actually having to install the app. I'm not sure how well this actually works at the moment. I don't know a lot of companies that have been playing around with this, but it is something you probably want to keep an eye on if you work with a company that has apps that might be struggling to find a good user base for their apps. Now, another technology you want to talk about is, of course, accelerated mobile pages. It's been around for a while. It's not going to go anywhere. In fact, I think Google is quite adamant about making AMP a sort of new de facto standard for the web. AMP is positioned, of course, as an open source project, but let's be honest, it's a Google project. Most of the code commits to this open source project come from Google engineers. So it is a Google project in all but name. It went after publishers first, but is now broadening its scope. What is AMP? Briefly, it's basically alternative versions of your web pages that are built specifically for fast load speed and mobile viewing. It's a mobile standard primarily. It's pretty restrictive because Google wants it to be very, very fast. And that also means that it doesn't allow for a lot of non-standard stuff or extraneous JavaScript. And it's an all or nothing standard. It's either valid and Google will serve it as an AMP page, or it's not valid and Google will just ignore it and treat it as just another web page. So it's pretty restrictive, and you have to sort of play around with it a bit to see where those boundaries lie. Now, what I find really interesting is the reasons behind Google launching accelerated mobile pages. It's not specifically for the speed of it, although it is a big part of it, but I find that that is more the excuse that Google has to justify AMP. Why is Google actually using this? Well, because of this. If you look at this particular graph, we see there on the left-hand side, monthly unique visitors. Apps are lagging behind the mobile web quite a lot. What does that mean? It means that the mobile browser on your smartphone is mostly the most often opened app. Your Safari or Chrome browser on your phone is the app you use the most compared to all the other apps. However, you spend the least amount of time in it as well. Those are the bars on the right-hand side. So you fire up your mobile web, you look something up, and then you go out again. You go back to your other apps like your Facebook feed or your Instagram, whatever it is. So the app is primarily for discovery. The mobile web is for discovery, and native apps like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, they're for engagement. They keep you engaged. You don't use them for searching, you use them for wasting time. Whereas the mobile web you use primarily for searching and for finding things. And that's what Google wants to change with accelerated mobile pages. They want to make the mobile web just as engaging as native apps. Because Google is a web-based company primarily, and they want people to keep using the web because they can monetize the web. Google's found a way to monetize the web with AdWords advertising, and they want to make sure people keep using the web and don't start switching all over to native apps. And we see this in the increasing spread of contexts where AMP is being served. We started with news, of course, but now normal articles will also have AMP versions in mobile search results. And there's now also recipe carousels on Google for accelerated mobile pages. This is very deliberate by Google, of course. They want AMP to become a sort of de facto standard so that they can offer those sorts of instant loading, highly interactive experiences using the mobile web and without people having to install specific native apps on their smartphone. So what does an AMP page look like? It's basically pure HTML5, so it'll render in nearly all browsers. It's pretty standards compliant. There's not a lot you can do with it that's not approved because all the JavaScript libraries are official AMP libraries. So you have to learn to work within the constraints of the platform. And what I find interesting is that structured data is integrated in it, which means that for every AMP page, Google knows exactly what the page is about, what the content of the page is, and how it can be used in different contexts. If it's a recipe, it can be used. If it's an article, a news article, how it can be used, etc., etc. So I find that a very interesting part of the Google AMP. But for me, the most interesting part is the AMP cache, because the AMP cache is really why AMP is so fast. It's not because the pages are themselves inherently fast. I mean, you can build a really fast, lean, mobile optimized website without AMP. But AMP does tend to load faster for most people. And why is that? It's because Google serves AMP pages from the AMP cache, and the AMP cache itself also performs extra speed optimization on those pages by, for example, optimizing images, minifying the code, and generally serving as a worldwide CDN for serving AMP pages. What also happens is that pages loading from the AMP cache on Google search results are preloaded, pre-rendered in the background. So that when someone on the mobile search results gets an AMP carousel with top stories, for example, those pages, those stories will already be loaded in the background before the user actually clicks on them. So that when the user actually does tap on them, The pages load nearly instantaneously, and people can just swipe through that carousel very quickly and effortlessly because all the heavy lifting has already been done by their browser. So the speed that we're experiencing with AMP is a bit of a cheat by Google. They're sort of cheating to make it so fast and to make it such a lightning, intuitive experience. And they do this on purpose, of course, because this is how native apps behave as well. Google wants to mimic the fast, intuitive experiences of native apps in the mobile web browser. And AMP allows them to do that. So in a nutshell, if you want to tap into the future of search, if you want to be findable in the era of screenless interfaces where people will start talking to their computers and where computers will proactively search and trigger their users, it's all about integration. It's about making sure that your content is machine readable. It's about making sure that you provide the right answers for your users. It's about not hiding content either in apps or in proprietary systems. And it's about starting to see your website as not only for purely human consumption, but also as a data source for machines. Your website will become a database with machine-readable information that search engines like Google can use to provide information, provide data, provide answers for their users when they use voice search assistants. So yes, that's it in a nutshell. That's all that I had. Thank you very much. And now we have time for questions.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Seems that we don't have any questions. Everything was very clear. And that will be all. Thank you for being today, sharing with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Well, have a nice day.
You too.